Goofuth didn't lose time after the events on the Starforge. He quickly developed a scheme that allowed him to use his newfound hero status productively. He asked the Jedi Council for one thing: undisturbed access to the Rakatan temple and the planet it was on, to be able to research the ancient Rakatan. The Jedi Council was reluctant, but found that they could not deny the hero Goofuth his wish, with him having too many avid supporters in the Republic Senate. Goofuth then managed, with T3M4's help, to set up a stable shield around the planet that made it impossible for any ship to land without Goofuth's personal permission. He then welcomed outcasts, bounty hunters, and, in some cases, outright criminals to his planet and started to form a nation, which he called the Force of Freedom. He began to form an army small enough not to raise any suspicion from the Republic, but big enough to defend the planet. Meanwhile, he secretly began to form another, smaller army, composed of Force-talented recruits. Those recruits were trained in a way that rejected both the ways of Jedi and Sith, abandoning the ideas of a light and a dark side. The remaining Rakatan were granted reservations on selected islands that were of no interest to Goofuth, with the promise that they would always be granted to keep their traditions and live according to their ways. Economic instability, along with a certain cultural shock, however, soon led to the downfall of the Rakatan tribes, and they were reduced to keep the reservations in working order by opening casino, much to Goofuth's liking. Goofuth soon sent ambassadors to Manaan. The Sarkath, who had banned the Sith from their planet and had gotten cautious towards the Republic, welcomed Goofuth as their hero. It did not take much persuasion to convince them to grant Goofuth's new nation absolute KotOR trading privileges, since the Sarkath considered his nation a truly neutral one, with a leader who, they assumed, had great respect for their ways and traditions. With this new nation politically, militarily, and economically autonomous, Goofuth started seeking contact to the remaining Mandalorian clans. He had a proposition for them. In exchange for safe havens on islands on his planet and financial support, the Mandalorians agreed to strike Republic and Sith planets in a complicated pattern that guaranteed equal damage dealt to both parties and appeared to military experts of both sides as if the attacking clans were allied with the other side. The resulting chaos, that was enhanced by the sudden absence of KotOR, allowed Goofuth to fortify his planet and army unobserved, until, after a few years, both Republic and Sith realized too late that he was beyond their control. He's planning big things. Mission Veo stayed with Goofuth, having taken a shine to the tropical paradise that his planet was. Once the Force of Freedom had grown enough to be called a nation, Goofuth appointed Mission the head of intelligence. In a third branch of the nation's training program, she began teaching new recruits in the arts of special operations. The intelligence acquired by Mission and her new recruits from both the Republic and the Sith was then selectively played into the hands of the Sith and the Republic, respectively, which increased the considerably growing amount of political chaos in the galaxy. A few years after the founding of the Force of Freedom, Mission's brother Griff came to the planet, on the run from criminal syndicates, the law, and many other people. With Goofuth's reluctant agreement, Mission employed Griff in an unimportant position. He seemed content in his place and did not get into further trouble until one morning he was found dead from an overdose of spice. His death scene seemed almost theatrically arranged, but investigations soon came to a halt because, for the first time since the nation's founding, the security system and its cameras, both controlled by T3M4, had failed that night. Juhani quickly left the planet, with her contempt for Goofuth driving her back to the Jedi Council. She advanced quickly through the ranks, and after a few years of training, teaching, and performed missions, she became a Jedi Master in good standing, her powers and determination respected by the Jedi and feared by the Sith. She returned to Goofuth's planet, and now nation, after that, on a diplomatic mission from the Jedi Council, who at that point had learned about Goofuth's private force academy and army. Goofuth listened to Juhani's very reasonable arguments with mild interest. He then had 10 of his most promising force students strip her of her lightsaber, ropes, equipment, and infused her subconscious mind with a tic that made her wince every time somebody said the words, "May the Force be with you." He then put her into a small, autopiloted space shuttle with directions to Coruscant. Both the Republic Senate and the Jedi Council have yet to react to this incident. Canderous Ordo planned on leaving the planet for good at first, but was instead convinced by Goofuth to go on diplomatic missions to the remaining Mandalorian clans in order to remind them of the more productive aspects of their traditions and have them send emissaries to the Force of Freedom, which eventually led to the aforementioned agreement. As Goofuth had planned, Canderous' frequent and intensive contact with the people he had abandoned instilled much of his old fighting spirit in him. Goofuth quickly appointed him general of his army and head instructor of his training facilities, positions much to Canderous' liking. He is now feared by the Republic as a cunning strategist, by the Sith as a relentless and fierce opponent, and by his recruits as the toughest drill instructor imaginable. T3M4 became head of internal security, which included a ridiculous amount of cameras, wiretaps, and orbital surveillance. As the security system grew, he was modified again and again, connecting him to more power sources in every branch of the Force of Freedom's administration. His modifications soon made it necessary to change his exterior, and after a few years T3M4 occupied a large building built around the original temple structure. He is completely unbreachable both in a physical and electronic sense, and answers only to Goofuth. Rumor has it even that Goofuth inserted the information of his brain into this large super droid, so that even after his death he will be able to rule his nation from the center of T3M4's enormous circuits. Carth Onasi returned to his position in the Republic Army, quickly becoming Fleet Admiral. Well respected by his subordinates, the Senate and the Jedi, Carth led the Republic fleet to many victories and was soon proclaimed the Republic's greatest war hero. Carth was the first Republic officer to realize that the Mandalorian attacks could impossibly be connected with the Sith, and soon suspected Goofuth as the cause of them. Without voicing his suspicions, he did not want Goofuth to get suspicious and adjust his schemes. He traveled to Goofuth's planet with just a small force. He claimed to be sent on a mission to set up a Republic embassy, for which he humbly asked Goofuth's permission in order to be able to investigate the planet. Surprisingly to Carth, Goofuth readily agreed and allowed Carth to search the whole planet for a suitable location. A few years later, a patrol on an island close to one of the Mandalorian clan's headquarters found Carth, along with a handful of his men, lying dead alongside the bodies of a few dead rancors. The bodies were sent to Coruscant alongside a guard of honor composed of Goofuth's finest soldiers. Carth's body was buried in space. It was so hideously mauled by the rancors that nobody noticed the lightsaber wound in his chest. Zalbar, still bound by his life debt, remained Goofuth's bodyguard. With the growth of Goofuth's new nation being quick as it was, Sith assassins soon started being sent, and if missions' intelligence reports were accurate, then soon some planets associated with the Republic hired bounty hunters for that task as well. Goofuth made a habit out of finding out where the assassins had come from and then proceeding to send back the body parts that Zalbar had removed from them. After a few years, Goofuth relieved Zalbar from his life debt. Zalbar stayed as his bodyguard for a while longer, but soon grew homesick and asked Goofuth to be allowed to return to Kashyyyk. Goofuth, who had relieved him from the life debt assuming that he would return to Kashyyyk, gladly gave permission under the condition that he'd be allowed to set up an embassy on Zalbar's home planet. Said embassy remained the only embassy on this planet, and for a long time only citizens of the Force of Freedom were welcome on Kashyyyk as non-Wookiees. With Zalbar's help, who at that point had united most of the Wookiee tribes in a peaceful union, Goofuth arranged for Kashyyyk to be a second haven and headquarters for those Mandalorian clans who didn't get along with the Mandalorian clans on his own planet. After that, and much to Goofuth's amusement, the galaxy became a reasonably chaotic place. HK-47 became the new nation's droid coordinator, with a small army of war droids whose programming made them only slightly less homicidal than their commander. Assisted by Canderous, he also managed to construct one large transport droid that resembled the basilisk war droids that were frequently used by the Mandalorian clans before their downfall. Goofuth frequently rode this droid during processions to his nations, and to important political meetings. Besides that though, HK's most important function was the one he was originally constructed for. Political and military leaders from both the Republic and Sith who got too interested in Goofuth or his budding nation, as well as some of the more reluctant Mandalorian clan leaders were, from time to time, found with gaping blaster holes through their chests, and a note next to them that read, "Dear Meatbag or Meatbags, the present deceased Meatbag has shown an unacceptable amount of interest in things that did not concern him or you. It is therefore suggested that you become as indifferent as possible in any and all regards. Sincerely, you know who." Since the vast majority of people did in fact not know who, Goofuth's nation's rise to greatness was accompanied by a great deal of intergalactic paranoia. Jolee Bindo remained Goofuth's advisor, at least for a while. After that he was appointed head trainer of Goofuth's Force Academy, but soon realized that Goofuth's idea of a reasonable use of the Force differed greatly from his own. When Goofuth wanted him to start a research project that was intended to enable his Force users to use a victim's inherent connection to the Force and reverse it, thusly having them combust and creating a remote-controlled human grenade, Bindo finally realized that his place was not at Goofuth's side. Not wanting to leave him unobserved, however, he went to exile on a small island. When Goofuth, in a moment of nostalgia, went to visit him a few years later, he found a small hut and some of Bindo's belongings, but no trace of the old man himself. On the table, though, remained a green lightsaber crystal, which Goofuth later used to create a special ceremonial lightsaber that he only carried on the most important of occasions. The bodies of Darth Malak and Bastila Shan were never found. Shortly after the event on the Starforge, though, a small salvage team led by HK searched what remained of the Starforge. Their official mission was to retrieve whatever technical details they could. They returned, or so everybody assumed, empty-handed. Shortly after that, though, the people closest to Goofuth noticed a slight change in his lightsabers, whose hilts seemed to have gotten longer. Goofuth claimed to have found a way to insert a fourth crystal into his sabers, making them even more powerful. It occurred to nobody that the extra space on his lightsabers, a long one and a short one, would have been just enough to fit the ashes of 2 sets of human remains.